The night before Thanksgiving, I sat in my daughter's kitchen and helped her brine a 20-pound turkey, while her mother-in-law Sylvia sat at the island drinking wine and explaining, in great detail, how her own stuffing recipe was superior to mine. I smiled. I refilled her glass. I asked if she wanted more bread. That's what I did. For 6 years, that's what I did. My name is June Hartwell. I am 54 years old. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and until 11 months ago, I was the kind of woman who drove 40 minutes each way to babysit my grandchildren twice a week, who showed up with groceries when nobody asked, who fixed things quietly before anyone noticed they were broken. I was the grandmother who never complained, the one who never asked for anything back. And I was the one my son-in-law's family had quietly decided didn't count. I want to tell you what happened last Christmas. Not because I need you to take my side, though I hope by the end you'll understand why I finally stopped taking theirs. I want to tell you because I think some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've sat in that room. You've watched it happen. You've told yourself you were overreacting. You weren't, and neither was I. My daughter's name is Claire. She's 31, a middle school art teacher, kind in the way that sometimes works against her. She married a man named Owen 5 years ago. Owen is fine. He's decent, he works hard, he loves Claire in the uncomplicated way that steady men love steady women. I have no quarrel with Owen. What I have is a reckoning with his mother. Sylvia Marsh is 62, widowed, and the center of her own universe in the way that certain women become, when no one has ever meaningfully challenged them. She has 3 sons, of whom Owen is the youngest, and she has made it her life's work to be indispensable to all of them. She is the kind of woman who says things like, "I just love being a grandmother," while making sure that being a grandmother is, in every practical sense, her exclusive territory. She doesn't do it loudly. That's what took me so long to name it. She does it with scheduling and proximity and the particular gift of making you feel unreasonable for noticing. Owen and Claire live in Fletcher, which is about 22 minutes from my house and 45 minutes from Sylvia's. By the math of it, I should have been the closer grandmother. By the math of Sylvia, that didn't matter at all. In the first year after my granddaughter Poppy was born, I kept a loose count, the way you do when something feels off but you can't yet explain it. Sylvia had Poppy overnight 14 times. I had her twice. Both times were because Claire and Owen had a conflict and Sylvia wasn't available. I told myself this was normal. Sylvia was retired. I still worked part-time as a medical billing specialist. I told myself proximity wasn't everything. I told myself to be grateful for what I got. What I got was a seat at the table on major holidays, which meant I sat across from Sylvia and watched her run the room while I refilled serving dishes, and kept track of which kids needed more milk. Claire and Owen had Poppy first, then 3 years later, a boy they named Theo. 2 children, 4 years old and 1 year old, as of last Christmas. The 2 best people I have ever met in my life. And I say that as a woman who has met a great many people. Sylvia also has grandchildren from her other sons. A girl named Harper, 6 years old, and twin boys, Colt and Jace, who had just turned 8. 5 grandchildren total, spread between 2 families. Every Christmas since Claire and Owen married, we had alternated. 1 year at Sylvia's house in Hendersonville, 1 year at Claire and Owen's house in Fletcher. Last year was Sylvia's year. I was invited as a guest the way you invite a neighbor. Warmly, correctly, with a place set at the table and a name card that had a little sprig of holly on it. I arrived with my arms full. A smoked salmon platter I'd spent 2 days preparing. A bag of individually wrapped gifts for every child. I had wrapped them carefully. Color-coded ribbons so the kids could find theirs easily. I had gone to 4 different stores because Harper was going through a horse phase, and I wanted to get her the specific model she'd mentioned in October. I had listened in October. I do things like that. The gift opening happened after dinner. Sylvia's living room was warm, the fire was going, the kids were sugared up and glittering with excitement. Owen's older brothers, Garrett and Neil, were there with their wives. It was a full house. Loud in the good way. Sylvia had arranged the gifts in 2 distinct groupings on either side of the tree. I noticed it when I walked in, filed it away, told myself there was a reasonable explanation there wasn't. When the children came racing in, Sylvia directed them with the cheerful authority of a woman who had choreographed this moment all year. Harper, Colt, and Jace each had a substantial pile on the left side of the tree. Matching pajamas, a remote control drone, art kits, books, a stuffed horse for Harper, that was larger and more detailed than the one I had brought. A child-sized telescope. A wooden play kitchen, still in the box, which Sylvia had apparently had delivered earlier in the week and assembled with Neil's help the night before. On the right side of the tree there were 2 gifts, both labeled with the same tag. To Poppy and Theo with love, 1 gift, shared, for 2 children. I stood near the doorway and I watched Claire notice. I watched her face do the thing that faces do when they're trying to absorb something that doesn't make sense. She looked at the tree, then at Owen, then very briefly at me. I shook my head, just slightly. Not now. Sylvia handed Poppy the shared gift to open. It was a board game. A nice one, a wooden memory matching game with animals but one. A single gift, shared between a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. Theo, who is 14 months old and mostly interested in eating the wrapping paper, could not have cared less, but Poppy understood. She is 4. 4 is old enough to understand. She held the game box in her lap and looked around at her cousins, who were knee-deep in wrapping paper and noise, and the particular chaos of children who have been given everything they asked for. She didn't cry. She is Claire's daughter, which means she has inherited Claire's quality of being too gracious for the room she's in. She just sat there with her game and watched. Then she looked at me, and I will tell you that I have lived through things in my 54 years. I lost my father when I was 19. I went through a divorce that left me rebuilding my entire life at 41. I have had hard years, real ones. But the look on Poppy's face that Christmas evening is the thing that will stay with me longest. Not sadness exactly. More like a question. The kind children ask with their eyes before they have the words. Did I do something wrong, Grammy? I excused myself to the kitchen on the pretense of starting the coffee. I stood at the counter for a moment with my hands flat on the cold granite and I breathed, just breathed. In and out the way you do when you're holding something enormous and you can't put it down yet. Claire came in 2 minutes later. She closed the door behind her. Mom, she started. I know, I said. I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was going to. I know you didn't. I turned around. Are you okay? That's the thing about being a mother. Even when you're the one who's hurt, you check on your kid first. She wasn't okay. Her eyes were bright and her jaw was tight and she said, very quietly, Poppy asked me this morning if she was going to get as many presents as Harper. I told her Christmas wasn't about the number of presents. I didn't say anything, and then I watched my mother-in-law prove me wrong in front of everyone. We stood there together in Sylvia's kitchen for a few minutes. I made the coffee. Claire made herself breathe. And I made myself a promise, very quietly, the way I make the ones I actually keep. Not tonight, but I am not letting this go. I drove home that night with the smoked salmon platter, still mostly full, in my back seat. I had offered to leave it and Sylvia had said with a bright smile that they were so stuffed, maybe I should take it home for myself. She said it like a kindness. I drove home with it and I sat at my kitchen table and I did not cry, which surprised me. I am not by temperament a confrontational person. I spent 13 years in a marriage where I swallowed things and called it patience, and it took me a long time after the divorce to understand the difference between patience and self-erasure. I had been working on that distinction for a while. Turns out Christmas gave me an opportunity to practice. I started making a list. Not out of anger, though I won't pretend anger wasn't in the room with me. I made a list because I am a methodical person, and because I needed to understand, in concrete terms, what had actually been happening. I wrote down every holiday, every birthday, every milestone, over the past 4 years since Poppy was born. I wrote down who was there. I wrote down what I contributed. I wrote down what Sylvia gave, and what I gave, and what the children received from each of us. I had driven a combined total of somewhere north of 4,000 miles in the past 4 years for things related to Claire's family. Not my own plans. Theirs. I had sat with Poppy through 2 ear infections while Claire was at school, and Owen was at work, and Sylvia had a standing Tuesday lunch she didn't cancel. I had taken 3 days of PTO to stay with Claire after her C-section with Theo when Sylvia was on a cruise, a trip she had booked before Claire's due date but had not rescheduled when the due date was confirmed. I had learned Poppy's preschool teacher's her favorite sandwich, the exact episode of her current favorite show that she'd last watched, so I could put it on the right one when she came over. I had been present, consistently, entirely, without announcement. And somehow, in the family architecture that had quietly assembled itself around Claire and Owen's household, I was the guest grandmother, the one who got a Holly Sprigg name card. I didn't stop there. I also wrote down what Sylvia had said to me over the years that I had let pass. Small things. The time she referred to Poppy's bedroom at my house as June's house, with a small pause before my name, like she was translating. The time she offered, in front of Owen's brothers, to take the kids to Disney World. And when Claire mentioned that I had offered to contribute to a Disney trip too, Sylvia said, "Oh, that's so sweet," in the voice you use for children's drawings. The time she rearranged the Thanksgiving table I had helped set, because she preferred a different configuration, without asking, while I was in the other room. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you could point to. Just the steady accumulation of a woman who had decided, without a vote, that the Hartwell grandmother was supplementary. I called Claire in the first week of January. Not to complain. I want to be clear about that. I called because Claire is my daughter and she deserved to know that I had noticed, and that I was going to do something about it. And that the something was not going to blow up her marriage or her life. I'm not going to fight with Sylvia's, I told her. I'm not going to make Thanksgiving awkward, or show up to Easter with a grievance list. Mom, but I want you to know that what happened at Christmas was not for Poppy and not for Theo. They are going to grow up knowing exactly how they were treated compared to their cousins. Children always know. Claire was quiet for a moment. I know, she finally said. Owen and I talked about it. What did he say? He said he would talk to his mom. I let that sit for a second. Okay, Mom. Are you actually okay? I will be, I said. I just needed you to know I saw it. What I did next, I did alone. I didn't tell Claire, and I didn't tell anyone else until much later. I wrote Sylvia a letter. I am not much for emails in situations like this. An email is too easy to misread, too easy to forward, too easy to screenshot and perform with. A letter is a letter. It arrives in an envelope. It requires a person to sit with it. I took 3 days to write it. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted every word to be the right one. I told her plainly what I had observed, that Poppy and Theo received a single shared gift, while the other grandchildren each received multiple, personalized gifts. That this was not the first time the children had been treated differently, though it was the most visible. That I understood she had longer relationships and perhaps deeper bonds with Garrett's and Neil's children, but that Poppy and Theo were equally her grandchildren, and what happened on Christmas this evening was something Poppy was old enough to register and remember. Ember. I told her I was not writing to demand anything. I was writing because I believed she was a woman who, if she truly reflected on what had happened, would not want it to stand. And then I wrote the part that cost me the most. I told her that I had been present for Claire's family for 4 years, in ways that had gone largely unacknowledged, and that I had been glad to do it, but that I was no longer willing to be invisible while doing it. I told her that the grandmother who stayed home from the cruise, who used her PTO, who drove 4,000 miles, deserved a seat at the table that was not contingent on Sylvia's availability. I wasn't asking for equal footing out of ego. I was asking for it because my grandchildren deserve 2 grandmothers who were both genuinely, visibly present in their lives. I sealed the letter. I mailed it. Then I sat down and made myself another list, a different kind. Every week for the next 3 months I made a deliberate plan with Poppy and Theo. Not standby plans, not gap-filling. I planned a trip to the Children's Museum in Asheville. I signed Poppy up for a Saturday morning art class I could take with her. I built a birdhouse with her in my garage over 2 weekends, which took longer than anticipated, because Poppy has opinions about paint colors, and they are not always efficient opinions, but they are deeply held. I took Theo to the park every Sunday morning I could, just the 2 of us, which mostly meant I sat on a blanket and handed him increasingly interesting objects to examine, while he made his feelings known about the texture of grass. I stopped waiting to be invited. I started showing up. 6 weeks after I mailed the letter, Sylvia called me. I want to be honest about this part because I think it matters. I had not expected a call. I had prepared myself for silence, or for a version of the conversation that would come through Owen and Claire rather than directly. Sylvia calling me herself was not something I had accounted for. She didn't apologize immediately. I had not expected her to. She is not built for immediate apologies, which I say without cruelty because neither, honestly, am I. What she said first was, "I got your letter, I know," I said. "I'm glad." There was a pause. A long one. "I let it be long. I didn't realize," she said finally, "how it looked from where you were standing." I took a breath. "I believe that," I said. "I don't think you meant to make Poppy feel like an afterthought, but I need you to understand that she did." Another pause. "Owen told me the same thing," she said. "He was not kind about it." I felt something shift in my chest quietly. "Good," I said. "I owe Poppy something," Sylvia said. "I'd like to take her somewhere, just her. Not the other grandchildren, not a group thing. Just Poppy. I think that would mean a great deal to her," I said. "And I owe you an apology," she said, in the slightly formal way of a woman who doesn't apologize often and wants to make sure it counts when she does. For a long time I think I've been operating like I was the only grandmother in the picture. That wasn't fair. Not to you and not to them. I didn't tell her it was fine, because it wasn't entirely. But I told her I appreciated her saying it. And I meant that. We talked for another 20 minutes. Not warmly exactly, but honestly. Conversation that doesn't solve everything but moves the furniture enough that you can breathe in the room. The following month, Sylvia took Poppy to Build-A-Bear, and then out to lunch at the restaurant with the grilled cheese. That Poppy currently believes is the finest culinary achievement in Western North Carolina. She sent me a photo, the two of them at the table, Poppy holding a stuffed rabbit she had named Butterbean. I stared at that photo for a longer time than I would like to admit. Poppy came home and told me, with the authority of a 4-year-old reporting breaking news, that Grandma Sylvia had let her put the sparkle eyes on the rabbit herself, and that it had taken 14 tries because the first 13 were, in Poppy's assessment, not quite right. "Did you have fun?" I asked. She nodded, already distracted by Butterbean's ears. "Good," I said. And I meant it. I want to be careful here, because the easy version of this story ends with Sylvia transformed and everything balanced and my vindication complete. That's not quite what happened. She hasn't paid back anything I invested. She hasn't acknowledged in any formal way the years of imbalance. She still arrives at Claire's house like she owns a share of it, which I have come to understand is simply Sylvia's way of moving through the world and is probably not changing in year 62. But she sent Poppy a birthday card this spring with her name on it. Just Poppy's name. Not Poppy and Theo. Poppy's name with a gift card to the bookstore Claire had mentioned Poppy liked. It was a small thing. It was also the first time Poppy had received something from Sylvia that was clearly hers alone. I put the card in the memory box I keep for Poppy. The one with her hospital bracelet and her first drawing and a dried flower from the bouquet I brought when she was born. I put it there because small things, the right small things, deserve to be kept. Owen called me about 2 months after Sylvia and I had our conversation. He didn't preface it, which I respect. He just said, "June, I'm sorry I let things go on as long as they did without saying something. You've been there for us in ways I didn't fully appreciate out loud. I want you to know I appreciate them now." I told him thank you. I told him it mattered to hear it. Then he said, "Poppy talks about you constantly. Did you know she tells everyone her Grammy builds birdhouses?" I didn't know that. I cried, briefly, after we hung up. Not sad crying. The other kind. Here's what I want to leave you with, because this is not really a story about Christmas gifts or politics or even Sylvia. Not at its center. It's a story about what happens when you are so committed to being the one who doesn't make trouble that you slowly disappear. Not all at once. Gradually, the way a path grows over when nobody walks it. You are still there, but you start to feel like you are not quite visible, even to the people who love you. I spent a long time believing that being present, being available, being the grandmother who shows up without being asked, was its own reward. And in some ways it was. I don't regret a single one of those drives. I don't regret the PTO or the ear infection nights or the birdhouse that took 4 weekends, because Poppy changes her mind about paint colors, the way other people change socks. But presence without acknowledgement has a cost. And that cost is paid quietly, over time, in the currency of your own sense of worth. I am not a woman who needs to be celebrated, but I will tell you that there is a difference between being taken for granted and being genuinely seen. And I had confused the first for the second, for longer than I should have. The morning I mailed that letter to Sylvia, I sat in my car in the post office parking lot for a few minutes before I started the engine. My hands were a little unsteady. Not from fear, exactly. From the strangeness of doing something you've needed to do for years, but kept finding reasons to put off. But I thought about Poppy's face at Christmas. That look. That small, precise question asked with her eyes. And I thought, if she is watching, if she is absorbing everything the way children do, then what I want her to learn from her Grammy is not how to disappear gracefully. I want her to learn that love is not a competition, but it is a practice, and it requires showing up for the people you love, and, eventually, for yourself. I want her to see a woman who, when something was wrong, said so. Calmly, clearly, in complete sentences, with a stamp on it. Because that's what she's going to need to know someday, not how to sit quietly in a room where she doesn't count. How to be the one who makes sure she does. So if you're the grandmother whose name goes on the backup list, if you're the sister who holds things together while someone else gets the credit, if you're the person in any family who has been labeled low maintenance, and practical, and dependable in a way that has started to feel less like a compliment, and more like a set of instructions about how to treat you. This is for you. Know what your presence is worth. Name what you see, and mail the letter. This is Selina Payback, because knowing your worth is where it starts.